Hi guys, I'm Guritas, and today we're going to be doing a tier list for Shapeshifters Team 2. Let's get into it. First up, we have Petr Cech. He's been given a striker card, and this is a really generously priced SBC by EA. They do need to do more like this, where they're pricing them in a place that's really accessible. So this is coming in at an 85 and an 87 rated squad. Really cool card. A 6'5" lengthy striker with a 5-star skill move upgrade is fantastic. 4-star weak foot as well, so that is in a good spot. The thing in this game, for me though, with strikers and centre-backs in particular, the moment you put a player in one of those positions, which isn't naturally their position, they just generally don't have good enough animations to ever really break into that A tier and S tier. So for me, as good as the stats are on this card, and as much as it lends to that fun factor, after trying him, I think he's just a solid B tier card. Next up is Grinch. Now, he's been given a 98 rated striker card. This card looks absolutely amazing. The first card that comes to mind when I look at this is Pele's Prime Icon card. It's very similar rated, similar stats. However, this Grinch card does have the short and lean minus body type. It's very overlooked, but it's a really responsive body type in game. Like, the left stick dribbling on players that have this body type is phenomenal. So to have that on a 98 rated card with these stats, and he's also been given the finesse and outside of the foot shot traits on top of that to give you the more favourable animations on goal. I can see some people throwing this card into the A tier because it's not 5-5, but for me, this is an S tier card. Next up, we have the left back Riquelme card. Now, I feel like this is quite a missed opportunity here from EA because Riquelme's cards have always been very unusable. However, he's finally had the opportunity now to have a really usable card, but I feel like the way they formatted it and approached it has still made him kind of useless. So he's right-footed, but they put him as a left back. He's got 5-star skill moves as a wing back, but he's medium high, so he's actually very defensively orientated. So it's just very backwards for a card. I think the card will play like a solid, like minimum B tier card, but because of where they've positioned him and how his work rates are, it's just kind of just like this, just more desirable options. So the card itself is probably a B, but I think for how EA have formatted the work rates and the positioning, I actually just think like this just could be way better. So I'm going to put this card in the C tier. Next up, we have Pepe Reina. Now, like Petr Cech, he has been given a striker card as well. The stats on this card aren't quite as strong as Petr Cech. He's 4-star, 5-star, not 5-star, 4-star. And I just think it's very similar to Cech, but he just has less about him. Like, his in-game dribbling stats, so not the face card dribbling stat, but his actual in-game dribbling stat is only 83, so that's quite low. So he's not kind of great ability on the ball. Yes, you can compensate it with a chemistry style, but it never really quite feels the same as when the base stat is high. He's not lengthy, so he's not kind of got that powerful running aspect about him like a Cech does. He's not super tall, he's 6'2", opposed to Cech, who's 6'5". And I just don't see anybody, like, putting this card in their team as a, oh my god, that card, like, improves my team. So I just don't think anyone's really going to use this card. Even out of these goalkeepers that have been moved up front, I think he's one of the less desirable ones. So he's an objective card. It's cool, it's free, but I just think it's boring, this one. So this one's going straight in the C tier for me. Next up, we have Milinkovic-Savic. Now, this guy is 6'8". He's also been moved from the goalkeeper position, but this time it's to the centre mid position, not the striker position. Now, I'm a bigger fan of this because in the midfield, unique animations and stuff don't come into play as much. Base card stats do make a big difference, and as do the weak foot, the skill moves, those kinds of things. This card is 5-star skill moves, 4-star weak foot. He remains 6'8", so he's an absolute humongous presence in the midfield. And I have actually played a few games with this card already, and I've scored more goals than games played with him purely from corners. So you have a serious aerial threat with this card. He breaks up the midfield play fantastically just because of his humongous frame, and he actually moves really good for somebody of his size as well. I actually think this is an amazing card. Now, I don't think he's S tier. You're still not going to see players pick this guy over the likes of the Hullets, the new Socrates cards. You know, those guys are like the cream of the crop, but this card is like kind of the next best thing. So for me, this is a really solid A tier card. Next up, we have Guendouzi. Now, he's been moved to centre-back for the Shapeshifter card. He is 5-star, 5-star, which is obviously absolutely fantastic. He's got really, really good stats, however, not for a centre-back for me. He's got the controlled running style regardless of what chemistry style you apply to him, so he can't be made lengthy. And I think for this card to be a truly, truly solid centre-back at this stage of the game, he would need that lengthy accelerate type. So for me, as a centre-back, it's a complete pass. But moved into midfield, if you start your team in a 5-back and then transition into a 4 in game and move this card into, say, the CDM position, then this is a really, really good ball-playing sort of defensive midfielder with those 5-star, 5-star capabilities. Guendouzi, you know, the hair trait in game, he's always been a solid card in FIFA. So knowing how good Guendouzi just generally is in this game, with the 5-star, 5-star upgrade, thinking of this as a card that you would move into the middle, I think this is actually a solid A-tier card. Next up, we have Wilfried Zaha. He's been given a right-back shapeshifter card. Honestly, because his base pace is so high, you can format this card really any way that you want. Whether you want him to be a more defensive wing-back, you can just crank the defensive and physicals. If you want him to be more of an overlapper, you can definitely give that shooting a generous upgrade. So honestly, considering we're in a game with a meta of like really good attacking fullbacks, this card coming in at 5-star, 4-star, unique body type, high work rates, maxed out base pace pretty much, really high base dribbling, like just an amazing card. Really, as far as wingbacks go, he's probably right up there with the best of them. However, not naturally a defender, so he's probably not going to really kind of jam you out of those really rough situations where you've near enough given away a goal, but definitely a solid attacking fullback. So I think, considering he is a fullback, I think this is an A-tier card. Next up, we have Olivier Giroud. He's been given a centre-back card. He's got a huge frame at 6'4". He's got really good base stats and he is lengthy. So he's got kind of like the blueprint things that you need for a centre-back in this game. But as I mentioned earlier, with strikers and centre-backs, the moment you put someone in those positions that isn't normally in those positions, unless they had like an abundance of traits and stuff, they just don't perform with any of the top echelon of players in that position. So he'll perform as a decent centre-back. It's very parallel to the Sorlock card that they released, but they're just not going to perform in game like any of your top-tier centre-backs. So for me, it's just another B-tier card, this one. Next up, we have Ousmane Dembele. Now, he's been given a centre-attacking midfielder card. He can also be played as a centre-forward or a centre-mid in your squad builds. Very interesting that they give the centre-mid position starting with some of those defensive capabilities that they've actually added to this card, kind of lending to that centre-mid, attacking-orientated centre-mid that people love to do in this game with a 4-3-2-1, which is obviously one of the more stronger formations. Card's absolutely cranked. He generally always gets a 97 rated card around this point in the year. It can be made onto the control running style, which for me is a lot more preferable over the explosive, on an anchor, architect, or marksman chemistry style. So lots of possibilities with this card. 5-star, 5-star. He's always had good animations in game and played above his stats, and this one already has amazing stats. So no other place than the S tier for this one. Next up, we have Manuel Neuer, his first special card of the year coming in as a striker. This card for me is very much a copy and paste of the Petr Cech card, just a right-footed version. Really good base stats, lengthy on the majority of chemistry styles, very tall at 6'4", 5-star skill moves, 4-star weak foot. The thing that I do really like about this Neuer card is they have given him both the finesse shot and the outside of the foot shot trait, making the shooting a bit more consistent on goal. But I just don't think, regardless of what you give these cards, they really ever perform like the top tier ones from trying these cards out. So for me, as good as the card is, I think he sits in the B tier with Petr Cech on this one. Next up, we have Seedorf. Really cool to see this man finally get a really solid juiced card in this game. The thing that I think makes this card stronger than it looks at first glance is that at base, he is already on the lengthy running style. So what's fantastic about that is you can combat that 88 pace straight away with a Shadow or a Hunter, depending on what you want to do with the card. I think you just go full on with the Shadow on this one because of his work rates. And I think essentially in game, he's going to play like a really physical Kante. He's 5'9", which is at that kind of height where they're not really short, but they're short enough to the point where they turn nice. So I just think this card's going to be a real aggressive, fast tracking sort of defensive orientated midfielder. So I think this is a solid A tier card, this one. Next up, we have Petite. Now, he's been given 2 cards in this promo. This is his 95 rated cam version. Bit of a weird card. I feel like on face value, it's just like a 3-star weak foot Zidane in the way that it's formatted. Mainly where the defensive stat is at is kind of probably leaning me towards that more than anything, along with the fact that he is French in a centre mid. But it has really good stats, but I just think at this stage of the game, the defensive stat would need to be higher for him to kind of get up into the A and S tier, or he would need to be like 5-5 like a Zidane for his defending to be at this point and get away with it. For that sort of really attacking orientated centre mid in a 4-3-2-1, you wouldn't really play him there because he can't Travella, his shot power is too high, so there's just kind of no place for this card for me at this stage of the game. So as good as it is, and I'm sure he will play good in game, I just think it's like there's just so many better players for wherever you play him. So for me, it's obviously going to be solid just because of how high the stats are. So I think this card just basically belongs in the B tier, this one. Next up, we have the centre-back version of Petite. Now, this card, I think, again, like Guendouzi, I would probably be starting in a 5-back and then transitioning into the more defensive positions in the midfield. Again, mainly because he can't be made lengthy. And to be honest, 86 base pace on a controlled running style in this game just isn't it at centre-back. You need them to be at least around there with the lengthy running style. This card has a 5-star weak foot, so I definitely think as a defensive-orientated centre-mid, he would be very good. For me personally, when I'm looking at what I want in a player, I genuinely probably say he's B tier, but I think from a really kind of neutral perspective, his defensive and physical stats are so high at base. Petite does have decent animations in game, hair trait, I feel like the 5-star weak foot as well, so he's going to be really consistent with the passing. I think he probably actually is like an A tier if you play him as a defensive midfielder. For me personally, he's more of a B, but I think it's fair to give him the A tier for this one. Next up, we have Frankie de Jong. Now, he's had a very minor shape shift in the sense that they've moved him from centre mid to CDM, so not much of a change here with this card. However, he can also play centre back, so there is that. I feel like centre back would be a really weird place to put him. The only plus to that is there's another way to fit him into your squad builds. This card, I feel like for most people, is just like an obvious A tier card. However, for me, when I really kind of dive deep and look at this card, I actually think there's a potential for this card to be S tier. And you might look at the card and think the shooting is lacking to be considered in that sort of S tier. However, with the way his shooting is formatted and with the shooting traits he does have, he's very much going to be a strong Travella threat. And it's boring. It's like, come on, change the record. But it's the reality of it. In any other game, yes, solid A tier card. But for FIFA 23, with what works, with what are all the sort of tick boxes you need to consider for what makes the card meta, this card has pretty much everything going for it. The only thing he doesn't have is 5-star skill moves. And to be honest, for his position, that's not too important. The weak foot definitely takes prominence over the skill moves for a sort of centre mid, a ball playing centre mid. So for me, because he has that Travella threat, 4-star, 5-star, so many amazing animations in game, I think for me, he's actually an S tier midfielder. Any other FIFA, he'd probably go into the A, but for what works in this game, he's S tier for me. Next up, we have Samuel Eto'o. Now, he's been given 2 cards that are basically carbon copies of each other. One's a left winger that is right-footed, one is a right winger that is left-footed. Everything else, as far as I can see, unless I'm missing something, is exactly the same. They are both 5-star, 5-star players. Incredible base stats, particularly on the pace and the dribbling, which are obviously very key parts of the card as an attacker on this game. So for them, at base bit 97 is absolutely fantastic. Eto'o does have the lean body type in game, which only leans even more into that responsiveness the card's going to have on the left stick. So for me, particularly the right winger version, because we don't have many right wingers in this game that are really good, I think they're both just S tier cards. The 5-star, 5-star capabilities, the extremely high base pace and dribbling. Eto'o's great in game anyway with the high-low work rates. This card just has so much going for it, and I don't doubt he'll be an absolute animal. So both of these straight into the S tier for me. Next up, we have Martial. Now, he's been given a centre midfielder card, and it is really juiced, to be fair. When you look at the stats on this, it's an absolutely phenomenal card. Now, the only thing here, and I feel like this is where I'm going to probably have a few people disagree with me, the reason for me that de Jong goes into the S tier is because the only thing that's lacking on his card actually lends to the meta in this game. With this Martial card, he has a lot going right for him. However, because his position isn't naturally there, I know for a fact the animations you get on his passes aren't going to be at the level of somebody like De Jong's. Now, Martial definitely has the better base stats, but I just think it's kind of like the new Zambrotta card. It's going to be amazing in game, 100%. But when it comes down to it, they're not going to be in that like top 3 that you can choose from, you know. You could maybe argue De Jong wouldn't be either, but I just think the fact that De Jong has that Trivela threat at the stage of the game where stats are so high, they're generally surpassing that. I just think that's quite a unique sort of extra thing the card has going for it. So for this card, for me, I think it is a really solid A tier card. In fact, he's probably on the fence, and I don't really disagree if you want to put him in the S tier as well. I like to try and be really strict with the S tier. So for me, I'm going to put him in the A tier, but if you think he's S tier, let me know down below. And you know what, if you think that, I don't really disagree with you either, but I'm going to be strict on this one and trust my gut with the sort of passing animations and stuff not being as favourable as some other cards, and I'm going to put this card in the A tier. Next up, we have Richarlison. He's been moved to the right wing position. He's also been given the 5-star skill move upgrade. Already obviously has the 5-star weak foot, so he is coming in as a 5-star player. Really good stats on this card, not great stats. At this stage of the game, if you look at the likes of the Ousmane Dembele and just a lot of the other top tier cards that we've got, their stats just edge this card, you know. So for me, Richarlison, if he came out with this kind of card at the start of Team of the Season, you'd definitely consider him, in my opinion, like an S tier card. However, I think it's purely on the basis of the base card stats that this card just doesn't quite push itself into the S tier like it maybe would have done a little bit of time ago. He also doesn't have like any key shooting traits like finesse or outside of the foot shot as well, so there is that as a small sort of minor drawback on this card. It's awesome, though, to see a solid 5-star right-winger card. Like I said, we've definitely not had enough of them this year. So, for me, the card has a lot about it that I like. It's definitely a card I would use and I'm considering using. However, to try and be as neutral as possible and be as fair as possible with this tier list, I think this is just a solid A-tier card. Last, and to be honest, maybe least, we have this Cabrera card. Now, it's an outfielder that's been moved to the goalkeeper position, which always makes me nervous because goalkeepers are dodgy even at the best of times. So to have an outfielder moved into goal, I have no idea how that's really going to work. But he's a decent height to be a goalkeeper, but he's not going to have any goalkeeping animations that are particularly unique. He's going to be very generic. There are lots of better options. And to be honest, even though the base card stats are pretty decent, I just don't see anybody bothering with this card, to be honest. So, yeah, I think considering the goalkeeper is the player that we have the least control over in this game, I genuinely just think don't bother with this card. Just get like a Van der Sar, a Donnarumma, just someone that's tried and tested and you kind of know what to expect out of them. So it's a cool idea. I'm glad they've done it. But 1, it should have been Kyle Walker, and 2, just D tier. Don't bother. So there is our completed Shapeshifter Team 2 tier list, guys. Let me know who you disagree with down below, and don't worry, I don't take it personally. I often look back at these videos and I disagree with myself, to be honest. Like, with these cards, particularly at this stage of the game, and I think particularly with this team, they give us a lot of good cards. Like, I can definitely, like, make arguments, even myself, for a lot of these players to be in different positions in the tier list. Like, even now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking maybe that Petit should come down a level. I'm thinking that Czech card was actually really fun. Maybe he should go up a level, you know. So let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Like I say, no hard feelings. Let me know what you think. As always, guys, if you did make it this far in the video, I really appreciate your time. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and turn your bell on. Take care, guys.